On behalf of the Transatlantic Task Force on Ukraine, TTFU, I want to welcome my colleagues, panelists, and participants in Washington, Kiev, and Brussels, and on both sides of the Atlantic to today's conversation. First thing I want to mention to everyone that there is at the bottom of the screen in interpretation. If you want to and need to have interpretation, please use that. Joining us from Kiev, and I think this is, we really deeply appreciate their participation. We have three top experts, including a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, and experts who will focus on Ukraine's security resilience, including military, cyber, and energy. My name is Jonathan Katz. I'm Director of Democracy Initiatives at the German Marshall Fund, and also the co-founder of the Transatlantic Task Force on Ukraine. TTFU, as many of you know, is a collaborative transatlantic project that started in 2018 to strengthen transatlantic engagement and support for Ukraine and Ukrainians, including democratic transformation, internal resiliency, and Euro-Atlantic integration. Our partners include the German Marshall Fund in the United States, Reanimation Package of Reforms, Transatlantic Democracy Working Group, Black Sea Trust, and others on both sides of the Atlantic. At TTFU, GMF, RPR, and others, we cannot think of a more important moment for the transatlantic community to support Ukrainians than right now. For the past 8 years, Ukrainians have been under continuous assault, militarily, and through multiple means of aggression by the Kremlin. Russia's long war against Ukrainians and Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity has been nonstop. It includes the illegal annexation of Crimea, invasion in Donbass, thousands of Ukrainians killed, critical infrastructure under attack, relentless cyber attacks, saboteurs set loose in Ukraine, bomb threats at Ukrainian schools, and fifth column of actors working closely with the Kremlin to undermine Ukraine and Ukrainians and their future. Unfortunately, the list of malign actions is too long for us to even go into, but I know some of those that we'll be speaking today will touch on those challenges. We haven't even mentioned Nord Stream 2 and the use of energy as a weapon. So today, there are over 100,000 Russian troops and equipment that are placed threatening Ukraine. And this is on top of the other challenges that Ukraine is experiencing. As we know, Ukraine's partners in the West, the United States, the EU, NATO, and member states have been clear about standing with the Ukrainian people and Ukraine's right to choose its future, not Mr. Putin's right to choose that future. An attack against Ukraine will be met with a swift and severe response. This has been the mantra over the last couple of weeks of the United States, NATO, and other partners that have been working very closely with the Ukrainian government and people to address the current Russia crisis. I want to highlight, I think important, the critical role of the Biden administration in rallying support for Ukraine, also NATO, Secretary General Stoltenberg, the EU, which just announced critical additional support and assistance for Ukraine over the last couple of days, which I think is not only important in terms of military security, but strengthening the resilience of Ukraine internally. A number of countries have also stepped forward. And I think for those that have been watching what's been happening, you can really see a change in the alliance and how it's approached this issue. And I think the threat level that's being discussed. There is a clear understanding now that the Kremlin's steady drumbeat of war and Mr. Putin's designs are not only about security in Ukraine, but about security in Europe and globally. The idea of a Europe whole, free, and at peace is in the balance. With this backdrop, I want to turn to TTFU co-founder, co-chair Orest Dejavsky, and also after Orest speaks, we'll send it to Kiev, to my TTFU colleague and GMF colleague, Olena Prokopenko, and then we'll have our Ukrainian speakers weigh in. And also joining us is Bruno Leite, who's my GMF colleague in Brussels, who's also been a co-founder and partner with TTFU since the beginning in 2018. So if I can right now, I'm going to send it over to Orest. And Orest, just thank you again for your leadership on this, but there's been a number of people behind the scene pulling this together. Two bits of housekeeping again. One is interpretation at the bottom of your screen. Second, we will have a Q&A session that Bruno will moderate. And so you can use the Q&A function I think everybody, after a couple of years of these events, knows exactly where that's located. And we appreciate everyone's participation and thank you for joining us. Orest, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Welcome to all our speakers and to all of you for joining. And a huge thanks to our partners in Kyiv, RPR, Reanimation Package of Reforms, and of course to the German Marshall Fund. Let me just share a few brief observations regarding the US Western response. First of all, there's no doubt that a Russian invasion is being taken very seriously by the United States and our transatlantic partners, both on the diplomatic and deterrence front, in preparing to impose what the White House calls massive consequences and severe economic costs on Russia should they invade Ukraine. The level of interaction and coordination with our allies has been intense, perhaps unprecedented. And of course, with Ukraine as well, you often hear the refrain, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And it's no secret that there are challenges in working with some of our allies, notably Germany, on certain issues, not only Nord Stream 2, but I think it's necessary to keep as united a front as possible, recognizing that it may not always be possible in every instance, but we need to keep in mind that there are few things that Putin wants more than a divided NATO or EU, and that would be a disaster for Ukraine, for European security, and indeed for global security. Secondly, the US government across various relevant agencies, state and defense and treasury and the intelligence agencies and energy and USAID, I think are working very hard to help strengthen Ukraine's security resilience to counter Russia's aggression. There have been stepped up efforts even within the last few weeks and days, military equipment and other defense support, cybersecurity, very important, intelligence, countering sabotage, subversive efforts, disinformation, just a small example, State Department has issued fact sheets very recently countering Russia's narrative. You could check them out on the State Department's website. But this is an evolving process and much more remains to be done to build up Ukraine's resiliency, including notably on the energy front. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that from our speakers. Now, there are differing views, and this is normal within the US government and Congress and policy community and analysts about how best to deter Russia. For example, whether you hit them now with crushing sanctions and export controls and other measures, or wait until after they invade, or what kind of balance to strike between diplomacy and deterrence. But there is widespread agreement that Putin is a danger that must be confronted and contained. And while there are some substantive differences between Democrats and Republicans on the Hill, there's no doubt that there is a very solid bipartisan congressional commitment to Ukraine, and this matters. You saw just last week the visit in Kyiv of 7 key senators, Democrats and Republicans, and there's a bipartisan House delegation there now. Also work on what would be really tough legislation, what Senator Menendez, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has called the mother of all sanctions bills. And so far, this support for Ukraine appears to extend to most of the media, which has been covering this unbelievably, to analysts, and I think to the American public, although I would caution that there are voices who seem to be willing to concede to a Russian sphere of influence, and a few what one might call pro-Russian cheerleaders. For those of you old enough to remember, the Soviets used to call people like that useful idiots. One final thought: even if we manage to avoid some form of a military invasion in the coming weeks, you can be sure of one thing. Given not only Putin's belief that a democratic, successful Ukraine could serve as an example to the Russian people posing a threat to his power, but also given Putin's imperial ambitions and especially his, frankly, pathological obsession with Ukraine, whose very nationhood and separate identity he denies, Putin will continue to do whatever he can to destabilize and undermine Ukraine. He and all too many among the Russian elite just cannot abide the idea of Ukraine free to choose its own future. So barring some dramatic change in the Kremlin, strengthening Ukraine's security resilience will need to be a priority for a long time to come, and a priority obviously not only for Ukrainians themselves, but for all those around the world who care about freedom and democracy and the rules-based international order. I look forward to hearing from our distinguished speakers, and Olena Prokopenko, over to you in Kyiv.
Thank you very much, Horace. Thank you, Jonathan, for your insightful remarks. Dear colleagues, thank you for taking the time to join us today, and welcome to this briefing on Ukraine's security situation and the ways to enhance its resilience in the midst of multiple hazards. As you know, today Ukraine is facing an unprecedented military threat from Russia, and the highest, arguably the highest risk of a large-scale invasion that we can remember. Along with Russia's military buildup at Ukraine's borders, we are observing its escalated hybrid warfare that colleagues already mentioned, particularly major cyber attacks on the government websites, also on the state databases that carry citizens' personal data. We're also witnessing a major wave of false flag terror attacks across Ukraine, targeting not only schools, but also metro stations, trade centers, and other public places. Furthermore, Russia's passportization campaign in Donbass continues, and Russia carries out a full-fledged energy war against Ukraine. This is, of course, combined with the ongoing information war fought through multiple media outlets, online and traditional ones. As we know, multiple rounds of security talks with Russia over the past few weeks ended in a rejection of its outrageous ultimatums. Today, Normandy 4 advisors are meeting again, but no breakthrough is, of course, expected. And although the negotiations still continue, suggesting some cautious hope for diplomatic resolution, the growing security concerns call for a number of urgent steps to be made. And we believe that first and foremost, they call for strengthening Ukraine's own Euro-Atlantic integration efforts. This means accelerating the implementation of long overdue reforms, which are increasingly difficult to secure right now, as the president's team is starting early preparations to the next parliamentary and presidential elections of 2023-2024. This is complicated by the fact that ex-president Petro Poroshenko has almost reached President Zelensky's level of popular support, 21% against 23.5%, and has a good chance of winning both presidential and Rada races. Despite these domestic power struggles, of course, Ukrainian elites should not use external security threats as an opportunity to roll back critical reforms, including judicial and anti-corruption reforms. They should immediately end political persecution of opponents and predecessors, including ex-President Poroshenko, and join forces with all pro-Ukrainian democratic actors to fight Russia's aggression. There is also a critical need to further strengthen Ukraine's transatlantic support. In particular, we believe that the international community should adopt legislation envisaging strong personal sanctions against Russia's leadership, the defense and banking sectors in Russia, and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in case of further aggression against Ukraine. Western partners should also significantly increase their defense and cybersecurity assistance to Ukraine, which some of our partners are already doing. Furthermore, it is critical that NATO expand its military presence in the Baltic states and in Poland, and offer Ukraine clear prospects of NATO membership conditioned on tangible reform deliverables. And today we have invited 3 distinguished Ukrainian experts to discuss with us how realistic it is for these steps to materialize, and who can help us make sense of the current security developments. And I'm delighted to introduce them to you. Today we're joined by Yehor Cherniev, member of the Ukrainian Parliament, Deputy Chairman of the Committee for Digital Transformation, Head of the Permanent Delegation of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Ukraine's permanent delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Our next speaker is Zolkina, political analyst at Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation. We also have with us Olena Pavlenko, president of the DiXi group, one of Ukraine's leading energy policy think tanks. And I would like to address my first question to Yehor Cherniev. Yehor, as head of Ukrainian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, what is your current assessment of the current state of Ukraine-NATO relations, and what are the technical and political conditionalities separating us from being offered the membership action plan in the foreseeable future? Yehor, over to you.
Hello to everyone. Thank you for this invitation, and I think this important actually conversation because of course because of this buildup of Russian troops near our borders. As you all know, that one of the ultimatum of the points of this ultimatum was not to enlarge the NATO to the east, and actually, as said Peskov, or I don't know who was it, but from somebody from the or Lavrov, it was that our movement to NATO, Ukrainian movement to NATO, is a red lines for Russian Federation. It's ridiculous, of course, because we have our own right to choose our path, and actually, this decision should be made only by 30 allies from the alliance and actually Ukraine. However, we have to start, I think, from the beginning, from the 2008, when it was made the decision about making decision about the map, because the next step after this Bucharest summit should be the summit of the head of the ministers of foreign affairs of allies, from NATO, and on this summit should be made a decision about map for Ukraine. But today is 2022, and actually we spent almost 14 years since 2008 without any decision, without any step toward from NATO towards Ukraine. Unfortunately, yeah, we have annual national programs which we fulfill each year by year, and we have a good estimation from the side of NATO, and actually de facto this is a part of map. The Euro, we don't have map still, and I think that this, this time of 13 years of nothing was one of the greatest signal to Russian Federation that they can do what they want. And actually, this is the problem why we have right now the war in Ukraine, and actually the war in Georgia was one of the answers actually of Russian Federation to the absence of action from NATO. If we became a NATO member 10 years ago, I think the situation right now will be another actually. So what is the problem on our path to NATO or to membership action plan? First of all, we have to split it to two lists. First of all, actually, this is our homework. Of course, it's about reforms. Yeah, we have to achieve a lot of conditions, a lot of indicators that should make us closer to NATO standards. However, as you know, the membership action plan was established just in 1999. Before this, any countries, other countries was became a member without any membership action plan. And if we compare Ukraine 2008 and 2022, this is two different countries, and we do a lot through these 13 years, and we actually do a lot of reforms. And this, what I am talking about with our partners, that we need quite concrete list of indicators what should be done for the next step. And actually this list of indicators, it's a map, because map consists of annual national programs. These smaller list of indicators or requirements that should be achieved. And I'm not talking about the membership in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years even, because we clearly understand that we have to do a lot of homework and we have to achieve a lot, but still we have to have a perspective. We have to have clear indicators, as I said before. So, and this clear indicators actually a membership action plan. I can use as an example, for example, North Macedonia or Montenegro, countries which had approximately 8 to 10 years between MEP and membership. Okay, we as I said, understand that we have to do a lot inside our country. So this is the first list of reasons why we still without MEP. The second list, and I think it's more important, it's about political decisions. It's not a secret that some countries have some concerns about our movement to NATO and our further membership in NATO. As you maybe heard during the last week, some statements of officials from Germany, that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO, or Crimea will never return to Ukraine. It's pity. It's pity to hear this from our partners. And I think we should do a lot, not only from the Ukrainian side, but also from the side of any other partners from the alliance, that to convince Germany and German government to move forward, because there are not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between authoritarian regime and democracy. And next country will be countries from European Union or from NATO, because as we know that it's not about rational reasons for Putin. It's more about the global idea. As he said a few years ago, that it should be some common space from Vladivostok to Lisbon. And this is the idea. He tried to reestablish USSR in their former borders. He tried to spread Kremlin influence on the Warsaw Pact countries. So right now we need to be strong as a flank of eastern flank of NATO and all democracies. And our partners should understand this, that we fight for all democratic world, not only for Ukraine. I think I can stop here, and if you have any questions, I would like to answer to this.
Thank you very much, Yehor, for this comprehensive outlook. And I would like to get your opinion on what other security support measures could be timely for Ukraine right now, in addition to the prospects of the NATO membership action plan and eventual membership, which will not happen in the near future, unfortunately. What can the West do for Ukraine to support its security resilience? What can NATO do? What can the consolidated West do for Ukraine?
Well, I have to underline that we, as a partner of NATO, since 90s, actually have taken part in different common operations, not only trainings on the territory of Ukraine, but also it was operation. There were operations in Kosovo, Afghanistan, in Mediterranean Sea, etc., etc. And we actually showed ourselves as a reliable partner. For now, what can be done from the alliance part? First of all, it's training. Well, first of all, I think it should be the strong position on the diplomatic level, and we have it. So no any ultimatums can be offered from any third side to alliance about Ukraine. So the decision about our movement to NATO is decision only for 30 countries and Ukraine. The second position, so no step back in this position, and actually we have this strong position, and not only alliance but all allies, from alliance. The second one, it's training. Of course, it's trainings and our deeper collaboration. I remind you that last year we received the EOP status, enhanced opportunity partner. We became a enhanced opportunity partner that help us to change, to have some information from intelligence services of these countries, first of all, and it help us to increase our interoperability with countries of Northern Treaty. More trainings, more support. It would be great because NATO as an alliance cannot impose sanctions, but also they can do this work with all membership state countries to work with their government about sanctions. Actually, I can add about sanctions another one. Approximately 1.5 months ago, I was I was delegation of the Ukrainian delegation in Washington, and we had a lot of different meetings with Congress and Senate. And from some of senators, we agreed that we will offer a list of sanctions from our perspective, from Ukrainian side, what can be imposed and what can be more effective to face this threat from Russian Federation. And actually, Menendez and Rubio received our offer, this list from sanctions, which was prepared by the Council of Defense and Security and our Cabinet of Ministers. And I hope that we will see new sanctions from our list of sanctions in the new draft law in Congress and in Senate, because we sent not only for senators but also to some congressmen, and also we sent this list of sanctions to our British colleagues, to the UK Parliament. So these sanctions, diplomatic and trainings, plus of course weapon, these four positions can make stronger Ukraine and our position in this situation. The stronger Ukrainian army, the less options of Russian Federation action.
Thank you, Yehor. And I'll just wanted to ask you one more question within 1 minute, perhaps, because we're really pressed on time. But do you think the U.S. military assistance to Ukraine is sufficient for the moment? We saw just this week another shipment of defense weapons to Ukraine from the U.S. Javelins, and we can see intelligence support to Ukraine increasing. Is anything being held back that is needed at the moment, in your opinion? And what else can be done for Ukraine in these specific terms by the US?
Yeah, well, we very appreciate support from the US, from UK, from Canada, from different countries that supply to us weapons. This is not a secret that full-scale invasion starts from the aircraft bombing, from artillery, from missiles. So that's why we need as more as possible systems of anti-aircraft, anti-missile, anti-ship systems, because one of the scenarios that invasion can be from the Azov Sea, from the Crimea. So that's why the short list of the most important weapon that we need.
Thank you very much again, Yehor. And now I'd like to continue with our next speaker, Maria Zolkina. Maria, in the past few weeks, we've heard of multiple scenarios of the Russian offensive that may play out, from the escalated hybrid threats to the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. And now I'd like to focus not on these scenarios as such, but on Ukraine's capability to respond. How ready are we to face the escalation of the Russian aggression, and whose support can we realistically count on politically and militarily? Maria, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Olena. Couple of words about the general context, what is important in ongoing negotiations. First of all, what we have to actually emphasize together with our Western partners, especially with the US, who is a front runner in these negotiations with Russia on behalf of let's say, symbolic collective West. So first of all, there should not be any serious decisions in the framework of these negotiations until Russia demonstrates tangible de-escalation alongside the Ukrainian and Russian border, and in the framework of other types of possible Russian attacks against Ukraine. So during December, for instance, what we have heard from our American colleagues is that until Russia de-escalate, there will be no progress in negotiations. But nevertheless, Russia not only de-escalated the situation, but even made it harder and decreased the level of tensions, though negotiations are actually hit by this fact and they are going on. So this is like a principle we should all, from expert position, emphasize regarding to the decision makers, both in Ukraine and in Western countries. The second important point is that the real motivations, the real motives and the real arguments and goals actually Russia is following and trying to implement and reach in the framework of these negotiations. They are not about those unrealistic demands Russia makes or underlines in official let's say, informational space. So, and we, from Ukrainian perspective, have some fears about that Russia does not expect that NATO will give any guarantees of non-enlargement, let's say. But some of the NATO member states, in response to Russia concerns, can really be ready to agree at some point to, let's say, to decrease the intensity of relations between NATO and Ukraine. And what Yehor has already said, that Ukraine and NATO, despite of the lack of the membership perspective, have increased seriously the level of our bilateral relations. And one of our fears is that there should not be any compromises about how actively Ukraine and NATO should cooperate regardless of Russia's fears, even if we don't have a membership perspective for Ukraine as of now. And now let's go together, let's switch to the idea how and what actually supportive mechanism can be used and should be used, and where the synergy of Ukrainian capabilities and support on the side of the West will give a good after effect in terms of preventing Russia from invasion or other forms of aggression. So first of all, we have to divide all this support mechanism basket into two parts. First of all is what is being done right now in order to prevent Russia from any kind of serious aggression. And on the other hand, what should be done immediately if there are some signals and some actions in the framework of aggression. So about preventive measures. So of course, the most important mechanism to support Ukraine is to supply arms to Ukraine, weapons and new technologies, which we lack actually. And from this point of view, we have pretty satisfied with our relations with the United States, who are doing it very quickly and supporting Ukraine with the new technologies and weapons right now. But at the same time, this is not only about receiving some weapons and about arms supplies from the US and Great Britain. This is also about some problematic issues we have with some European countries, like with Germany. We know that during this, for instance, last week, the problem actually raised up to official level when the Ukrainian parliament appealed their colleagues in Germany in order not to prevent, not only in order to prevent Germany from further any kind of blocks for weapons supplied to Ukraine by other NATO members. We know that there was a problem when Germany doesn't support Ukraine itself, but moreover, they prevent other NATO members through the specific mechanism of consensus to support Ukraine and with arms supply. So this is what is going on right now. And we have all to understand that as of now, Ukrainian army doesn't need soldiers from any other country. Of course, we would appreciate that, but we understand it will not happen. But we don't need soldiers, we don't need people from other countries' armies. We need just technologies and weapons in order to raise the price for any kind of intervention for Russia. And this is how Ukraine contributes to the overall European collective security by its own people resources, by their skills and by their readiness, to fight in case we need to do that. And the probability we will have to do that is very high right now. It depends only in terms of in what form. What scale will it be, this aggression? But at the same time, the collaboration with the West is that we provide you with our army and you provide us with the weapons. This is the clear scheme we have to go forward with. The second component here, how to support Ukraine and what we actually ask for, and where we are ready to collaborate, is about preventive development of the strongest possible sanctions. And again, we are pretty close to the maximum possible sanctions when it comes to the US. And again, there is we don't see such a high readiness for similar strongest possible sanctions package when it comes to the European Union countries, not to the European Union in general, but to some European Union countries. So we have to emphasize that regardless of the form or model of aggression, rather Russia can choose, the sanctions should not actually, the signal to Russia should be like that. Regardless of what form of aggression you start, the sanctions will be launched. And this is a good preventive mechanism if Russia understands that the collective, let's say, collective West will not measure, is this aggression enough to launch the strongest possible sanctions, or it is still not enough. Because we don't speak about scenarios, but a majority of experts, including me, they say that the most suitable or the most comfortable, let's say, for Russia's scenario is not even the full-fledged invasion, but a serious escalation in Donbass or in other parts, some provocations in the sea, something on in other territories of Ukraine, cyber attacks, attacks on some critical infrastructure in Ukraine. And if let's imagine if Russia uses this scenario, it is pretty enough to launch the strongest sanctions, which should be actually not only developed, but they should be explained to Russia. So this game, when there is no consensus between US and the most powerful Europe-based countries, what to consider to be an aggression enough to launch strong sanctions, this is a pretty weak place in our common diplomacy towards Russia. The third, yes. So coming to conclusions. So this is about sanctions. Sanctions should include also further strong signal regarding personal sanctions, which are not, which is a specific issue, but it's a strong signal towards Russia, and all this package, let's say, with sanctions, they should be immediately launched as soon as we have some problems. And couple of figures, couple of numbers, instead of actually conclusions, about how Ukrainian society is ready or not ready to counterfight. So as of the latest public opinion poll at the end of December 2021, conducted by Democratic Initiatives Foundation and Razumkov Center, both are based in Ukraine, like authoritative think tanks. So Ukrainian society, in Ukrainian society, it's about 43% of people who are ready in various forms to personally join some counter-fighting activities. So 10% are ready to, among those 43%, 10% are ready to join Ukrainian army, 10% are ready to join either Ukrainian army or some kind of voluntary battalions like it was in 2014, and 23% are ready to support those fighting with any other kind of means and support, but not fighting themselves, And as a result, and about provocations and so on. So it's 48% in Ukrainian society, again, back to December 2021, who think that arms supply and common military exercises between Ukraine and its Western partners will rather prevent Russia from invasion than provoke. Since 2014, this is like stable public opinion about what recipes for reaching sustainable peace exactly in occupied Donbass. And these two recipes for peace are pretty simple, and they are right now the same as they were all the previous years. First of all, is diplomatic pressure on Russia with making sanctions stronger. And the second one is strengthening economic and military potential of Ukraine. And this is the good point to unite our efforts to follow this track, actually.
Thank you so much, Maria. And a follow-up question regarding our foreign partners and their assistance to Ukraine. What do you think could be Ukraine's most effective strategy towards Germany in view of Germany's resistance to provide significant assistance to Ukraine? There are reports just a few minutes ago about some defense assistance being provided, but we obviously need much more from a partner as large and influential as Germany. So what can be Ukraine's strategy to address that?
I think that to respond to this issue, Ukraine first of all have to make the problem official. So diplomacy not always like some loud announcements, you know, and loud statements. But at some point, like we have right now, the crisis period right now. So it might be useful to make the problem official and public. The second idea, the second instrument, is to work together with our allies. That is why I recalled the problem with Germany right now, speaking to actually mainly American audience, because as far as this lack of consensus is a problem, not only for Ukraine, but also for our Western partners like Great Britain, US, and Canada, the lack of consensus with some of the European countries like Germany and for instance, this issue. So we need to cooperate and collaborate. And if it will be like a diplomatic work and attempt to persuade our partners, at least not to make obstacles for Ukraine, the synergy effect of this common diplomacy will be great.
Thank you again, Maria. And just one last quick question to you. How did the changes in the leadership of the Ukrainian defense sector, primarily and specifically the appointment of Alexei Reznikov as the defense minister, play out in this current security crisis?
So due to, I'm sorry, my voice is not okay for public speaking, but I still try. The appointment of Mr. Reznikov to the defense minister position, I think this is the way out of a crisis, institutional crisis, in which unfortunately the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine appeared to be during last year. So regardless of the fact that this political person has never been involved in any, operation of any defense bodies. He is a good manager, and he proved to be a good manager in his previous minister, where he worked, so the Ministry for Reintegration. And due to attempts to make the Ministry of Defense not, the Ministry of the Army, but to make it a civic structure which should be ruled and we should have a civil chief, I think this is the good way. So, and it thinks as of now in terms of institutional control over all the process in defense ministry are really get better, even though not so much time has passed since appointment of Mr. Reznikov.
Thank you so much again, Maria. This sounds very promising. And I'm turning it over to our next speaker, to Olena Pavlenko. Olena, you were focusing on Ukraine's energy independence and security. Could you please elaborate on where we are in terms of addressing the energy crisis that has exacerbated due to the escalated tensions with Russia? Also, is Ukraine moving towards green economy fast enough to consider renewables as a viable alternative to traditional sources in the next few years already?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning and good evening, dear colleagues. Thank you for the possibility to talk today on energy security. So let me start from the statement that Russia is already using energy as a weapon against Ukraine. And it started not now, not last year, it started in 2006. Then there was a crisis in 2009. Mr. Putin always said that this is just a business, that gas prices for Ukraine is just an economic relations with Ukraine. But then we saw formulas, gas price in exchange of Black Sea Fleet. Then there was a formula, gas prices in exchange of non-signing association agreements. So very clear picture how Russia is using gas as a weapon against Ukraine. Last year, in 2021, we saw how Russia can use gas as a weapon not only against Ukraine, but also against the EU by controlling the volumes of supply of gas to the EU countries. So I would say that now Russia is using gas as a weapon not only against Ukraine, but also against the EU. And unfortunately, this situation, I think, will last in the future. So we have to prepare to such conditions, and we have to develop our resilience together. Now, to answer your questions, how Russia can use energy more in its war with Ukraine, we have analyzed some, let's say, threats which already happened in Ukraine with support, for support of Russia. I would like to ask John to share one slide with you, dear colleagues. So let me divide the threats into 6 categories. It will be easier. So physical threats, when there is a physical damage to infrastructure or disasters. Just as an example, Ukraine lost gas and electricity infrastructure in Crimea, for example, for gas production. Also, when Russian troops fired on energy facilities on the demarcation line, for example, on electricity facilities, they did not allow us to get this repaired for quite a long period of time. Cyber threats, we all remember a few years ago, there was a huge hacking attack on Ukrainian Obelenергos. Biological attack, which happened actually on these occupied territories. Russians, they allow, or they do it for purpose, to flooding of mines, which might create a really serious environmental damage for the people who live there. And also there might be something happened with nuclear, but not yet, thanks God. Information threats, it's happening all the time. We live with this. Disinformation campaign that Ukrainian gas infrastructure is outdated. It can be used for gas supply to Europe. It's inefficient and so on and so forth. But here I would propose to look at Russian infrastructure and how much methane leakage Russia creates. But let's not talk about this today. Climate threats and economic threats. Economic threats, just as an example, we can talk about Nord Stream 2 to stop gas supply through Ukraine. We can talk about a blockade of coal supply from Kazakhstan through Russia to Ukraine, which happened just last year, if you remember. The next slide, please. So we think that at least 4 out of these threats Russia may use in its war in 2022. First of all, physical damage to infrastructure. There might be explosion of some gas infrastructure, and then blackmailing of the EU countries to demand use of Nord Stream 2, for example. There might be also physical damage to electricity infrastructure, because Ukraine is going to join common electricity system in the European Union. So in order to prevent doing this, this might happen. Or within the war, Russia may destroy the electricity infrastructure not to allow people actually to use electricity, or many people use electricity to pump water from the ground. So there will be shortage of water supply. Cyber attacks, the same on gas infrastructure and electricity infrastructure might happen. Informational, as I said, this is what we live with and fight with every year. We have to travel to the EU countries and explain that Russia uses some disinformation campaigns against Ukraine, and explain with facts and figures why it is not true. It will definitely continue. And economic threats, again, this can be the blockade of gas supply or coal supply to Ukraine. Also, there might be a possibility from Russia and Belarus to blockade oil products supply to Ukraine. That's what might happen, or what might worsen if Russia would like to use energy as a instrument in its, let's hope, potential further escalation of the war. Then your question regarding green economy. I would like to say that our government has made a lot of commitments towards decarbonization and Green Deal agenda. Ukraine declared that it will join Green Deal strategy. Ukraine joined Hydrogen Association based in the EU and many other associations. But what is needed is to fix this declaration somewhere in the official documents. So we have to adopt National Energy and Climate Plan. We have to officially say when Ukraine will do coal phase out. These data, these deadlines are still not fixed officially. And this, I think, would be really, really very good for companies, for civil society, for just ordinary citizens to understand that these plans, these declarations are real. What we need actually for this to happen, I mean, the decarbonization path, first of all, this is a really huge investments. We have to invest approximately 10 billion euros every year to our energy sector if we want to be fully decarbonized by 2070. This is huge money. Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian citizens don't have them. So the government really needs to work hard to find international companies, IFIs and other sources who would like to invest into renewables, decarbonization and energy efficiency. Maybe I will stop here and will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Olena. In addition
Olena, you're frozen. You might want to just.
we're like efforts to make things.
Olena, can you repeat that again, please?
Hello,
You
Olena?
broke up.
I'm sorry.
you broke
Olena,
up.
Olena, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Please just repeat your question.
Yes. Sure. I was asking what other types of international assistance, in addition to increased investments that Ukraine needs, what other types of assistance in the energy sector could help us make Ukraine energy resilient and energy independent? And another question, if possible, those commitments that you said should be formalized in the public documents, are there commitments on the government side to actually do that? I mean, are those documents drafted already? Are they are they on the table yet?
Yeah, thank you. Let me start from the first question. Investments. The first, what Ukraine needs to improve energy sector and to move towards decarbonization path. Definitely, actually, development and implementation of new technologies. And here I would like to say that, for example, small modular reactors might be the issue where Ukraine and US can enhance their cooperation. Gas production, US has really, really great experience and a lot of companies who can use actually Ukrainian not very easy subsoils to increase gas production, and I'm pretty sure that Ukrainian government would welcome this. Energy efficiency and new technologies in energy efficiency. Ukraine is not is very, very energy inefficient. So to increase, to save more energy, I think new technologies are needed here. In terms of political, let's say, issues, we really need support of international partners to integrate to the European electricity system. It should happen in 2023. We understand that there will be a lot of obstacles which Russia will create, but we need support of the EU and the US to be ready to join NSOE, so-called NSOE, in 2023. I also wanted to say that United States.
Olena, I'm sorry, just 30 seconds if possible. We are really running out of time. So if you can, just 30 seconds. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Just one more sentence. I would like to say that the US has really, really great energy resilience system, starting from trainings, communication, and building capacity of different stakeholders. It would be really good if Department of Energy and US government could help Ministry of Energy and other stakeholders to build this capacity here in Ukraine. I believe this is a really good chance to enhance our cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olena. Thank you to all of our speakers. And I hope we have time to discuss the government actions to prepare Ukrainians towards the possible increase or escalation in the Russian aggression. And this is something we would like to address to all of you. But before we do that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Bruno Leite, Senior Fellow at the GMF office in Brussels, to share with us a European perspective on the current security developments and to take questions from our distinguished audience, which we have many already. Thank you very much. Bruno, over to you.
Дякую, Olena. I'll be very short because I understand that we have a hard stop in 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Just quickly on Brussels, I think most of us are well informed about what's happening here, but perhaps for our audience, let me just confirm that indeed, the level of concern is of course extremely high here in Brussels. It's the issue of the day. Everyone is talking about what's happening on the eastern flanks of the Union. I think, however, that Brussels being Brussels, the political configuration is very complex. There is clearly no general agreement on what the holistic strategy should be of the European Union to address this crisis. I think one thing countries do agree on. One strategy is accepted by all EU member states, and that is to raise the cost for Putin. That I think member states agree on, to raise the cost through economic sanctions, and some member states also go further than that and agree to also deliver technology and military means to Ukraine. However, even though there is agreement on raising the cost, I think countries still don't agree on how high to raise the cost for Putin. And I think this is still a major issue here in Brussels, that there's simply different visions on how this should be dealt with. So that's on the EU front. I actually just came back from NATO headquarters. I went over about 2 hours ago, and the debate there, I think, is a bit different than at the EU. And it's always a bit the funny thing in Brussels. You have both institutions in town, and sometimes we laugh. There's this virtual wall between them. But actually, I think the net result of Putin's aggressive actions is that NATO is even more united than before. I think we clearly see that now. The conversation I had at NATO also reflect that. The alliance is, has been very steady, I think, in its communication, has shown its unity, is being transparent also on what its strategy is. I've also been very surprised to see how quickly the alliance reacted to increase the defense of its most eastern member states, Denmark, Spain, France, the United States, Netherlands. Also Belgium now is considering to send additional troops, frigates, helicopters to the member states of NATO on the eastern flank. So there's I think there's clearly concern here that no one in Brussels has or at least war is still seen as a realistic option, unfortunately, by many here in town. But of course, meantime, diplomacy has to be invested in. There is a belief here that as long as diplomacy is going, at least war can be avoided. of course, you know, it's very nice that NATO is reinforcing its member states, but what does it all mean for Ukraine? You know, it was said before, you know, Ukraine will not become a member state tomorrow, maybe even not the day after tomorrow. It's not because of technical issues. There's simply no political agreement in the alliance for that. You know, I think that the Ukrainian armed forces have progressed intensively over the past years. You know, are rapidly modernizing and gaining NATO standard processes. So from a technical perspective, I think there's little issues here, but it's simply a political thing. So what NATO will do in that respect is, you know, it will continue its diplomatic messaging, reinforcing its support for Ukraine. There will, I think, also be an increased effort to provide Ukraine with more intelligence, with more information. Obviously, Ukraine should take advantage of any possible investment program that is available at NATO. That's for sure. I also think that an important task for NATO and for the EU is to keep on supporting Ukrainian democracy, because democracy is the biggest threat to the Kremlin, and that's a very important thing. So I guess this rounds up a little bit how we see things in Brussels. I don't pretend to speak for everyone in this town, but at least I hope this could summarize a little bit what the views are. So I've said way too much so far. We have about 10 minutes to take some questions. So let me dig into that immediately. And as your humble moderator, I want to be kind to the journalists that are listening to us right now. So why don't I take the question from the National News Agency of Ukraine and go back to the panel of that. So basically, there are two questions here. The member of our audience is asking if Ukraine's Atlantic aspiration is the main reason for Russian aggression. Is it because Ukraine wants to become a member of NATO that the whole situation that we see is occurring? That's one question. And the second question is about whether or not the Ukrainian government has some sort of strategy in mind to military advance in Donbass or in Crimea. So, you know, let me just take this question first and go back to the panel. You know, please remember we have about 10 minutes left, so be short, crisp, and concise in your answers. Get to the point. Yehor, what's your view on this?
So, to the first question. It's not only about our movement. This escalation is not only about our movement in NATO. It's an essential question because, as I said before, Russia considers Ukraine as a part of their territory and try to spread the information or disinformation not only in Ukraine or in Russia Federation that Ukraine is a failed state. Ukraine didn't exist in the history as a sovereign country. So why exactly now this escalation? From my point of view, because of figures that we have according to our survey, 80% of Ukrainians want to be a part of European Union. Approximately 60% of Ukrainians want to be part of NATO. So Russia understands that the window of opportunity is closing, because 8 years ago, it was definitely, absolutely different figures. In 2013, not more than 35% of Ukrainians wanted to be wanted that Ukraine be a member of NATO. So this is the point. About the second question, do the government has the strategy? Of course, yes. Of course, yes. But I can't discuss it with right now with you online because the strategy for different scenarios, at least 4 different directions we consider as an invasion, as a potential invasion. So yeah, on all these direction, we do all the best from our side, not only in the army, but also through territory defense units and through the, according to our points of the new law about national resistance. So Russian Federation will face not only with army, but also with different resistance on the different levels.
Yehor, thank you very much for that. In the interest of time, let me move to some more questions. There's also another interesting question here, and actually someone is asking, what role does Belarus play in the current situation? Perhaps Maria or Olena, could you respond to this?
I can shortly respond, and Olena, if wants, also can add. So I think that we don't divide anymore, at least from Ukrainian perspective, we don't divide anymore the danger which can come from Russian territory and the danger and the risks which are coming from the Belarus. So, and this is like the new instrument of how can Russia try to hide its intervention and some provocations if it tries to do it from the territory of Belarus. But for our foreign audience, we need to explain that though Ukraine has more than 1,000 kilometers of the border with Belarus, the majority of this border, the great part of this lands of this border is not suitable for effective land operations, but nevertheless it's still a risk, especially taking into account that not only the east of Ukraine but the northern east is also like a risky region in terms of possible invasion or any provocations. So the role of the Belarus here is just to be a platform which can be easily used by Russia for the same goals, which Russia just simply may not be interested to use from the Russian territory, not to make the aggression pretty obvious for the West.
Thank you. Let me add here from energy perspective. So in energy sector, Belarus can cut Ukraine off the grid and stop supply electricity for technical purposes, what it is doing now. But there might be a scenario that when Ukraine, within its NSOE integration plan, will start its work in 5 days in the independent mode, in isolated mode. When Ukraine would like to connect again to Belarus, Belarus might not agree to connect. Actually, this might be the first problem. The second problem is supply of oil products to Ukraine, because Ukraine and Russia and Belarus supply up to 70% of oil products to Ukraine now, and if they stop this supply, well, there will be a possibility to replace this fuel, but the time will matter. So Belarus can play some role, negative role, in destroying, let's say, energy security of Ukraine.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. That's indeed also important for our foreign audiences to understand what's happening out there. It's not always fully understood, I think, around here. So, you know, let me just take one more question. We still have 2 minutes on our clock, so let's benefit from that. There's a question that I thought was pretty interesting here, because it's not only about the traditional, you know, military aggression, it also goes about the hybrid warfare, which is, of course, an integral part of the problem. So one participant is asking if the panel can elaborate a bit more on the state of resilience and protection of critical infrastructure, which obviously would be a primary target of any cyber attack of other form of hybrid aggression. You know, not only thinking about the power, the energy centrals, but also think about hospitals, schools, food supplies. So how well is Ukraine prepared to defend its critical infrastructure? Who wants to go first? Yehor, Olena, Maria? Okay.
Well, I can be first. well, we had a good vaccine from Russia's Federation 2016. It was not better. It was quite huge invasion, cyber invasion in our and quite big damage of our not only critical infrastructure, but as you remember, it was a disaster of different authorities and not only authorities but private sector. So since that time, we had built quite good and resilient the system of cybersecurity. That's why the last cyber attack was not so effective and didn't achieve their, I think, main goals to destroy the database and stole this data from the Ukrainian authority website.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to add something to this, Maria or Olena? Olena, you're on.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to repeat what actually was said by Yehor before, but maybe it's not the time to discuss our weakest, places. But I want to believe that our government with regional authorities have developed local resilience plans where there are critical facilities safeguarded, yes, protected with the companies who will take some responsibility in case something will happen. So I do believe that something is prepared at the regional and local level. But maybe it's not the place to discuss it now.
But we can say about the good experience Ukraine already has on a local and regional level, because in Donbas in 2014, no one was ready for any attacks for critical infrastructure. There were permanent, regular, on a daily basis problems with electricity supply, with gas supply in terms of, heating, light, everything. And unfortunately for Donbas, but fortunately for the rest of Ukraine as of now, all the system of how to react in terms of local authorities' actions, how to react to support their hospitals, to support schools, to what to do with their houses for retired people. So what to do with such public, let's say, social entities. So people from Donbas, authorities from Donbas all know, and I also hope that they have already started sharing their practical experience with the rest of the region of Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much. I hate to end good debates, but I'm afraid we have to be pünktlich. Forgive me, the audience, for not taking all of your questions, but I do congratulate the panel on all the things that was said. This was already a fantastic briefing on the current state of affairs. Olena, thank you so much for your great moderation as well. You steered us through this stormy waters with professionalism. So here also ends my contribution, and Olena, Jonathan, Orest, back to you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, we're to be punctual. Bruno, thank you so much for your moderation as well. To all of our colleagues at TTFU, RPR, GMF, thank you everybody. To our panelists, we hope to come back to you again. Obviously, this is such a serious situation. What you laid out and explained today is so important for Ukraine's partners to better understand, and hearing from you directly was important for all of us. And we hope to reconnect on these issues again with you and other colleagues. And again, thank you to everybody for joining today on during a very busy week and a very challenging one. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, whether you're in Washington, Brussels, or Kiev. Thank you. Take care.